and we'll hear from, he's the Vice President of Utility Advancement. Sherry Ottinger, Manager of Rates and Analytical Services, are here with us today. Again, as I said, we're live streaming this meeting. You need to turn on your microphone while speaking, which, am I on or not? Okay, good. I didn't even turn it on. In order to be heard. And so turn it off, push the button. The green light signifies it's on, and the red light signifies that it's off. First, are there any changes to the minutes y'all were provided from the last meeting? Okay, we'll consider those acceptable. Primary purpose tonight is to start our discussion, and I'll underscore start because this is going to be quite involved and complex, and we don't want to rush anything, and as we agreed last time, we're going to keep open the opportunity to continue it to subsequent meetings rather than trying to force the issue and move on. So it's agreed that it's a topic that is really going to be challenging for us. We have a very good presentation of slides. You got those in advance, and we want to keep this meeting conversational as we move through. We need to discuss when you'd like to have your next meeting to continue, because we obviously will need to continue. We've already got the first Thursday in December reserved on your schedule, and we can discuss now or wait, but I guess wouldn't be a bad time to raise, do you want to have a November meeting or wait until December for the subsequent meeting to continue the discussion of rates? Does anybody have any desire to have another meeting in November? Or Ken?
I have such a desire. Yeah, I think we should have a meeting in November, and I think that rates, like you say, should be an intense enough discussion that leaving 2 months, I mean, I know I tend to forget, a lot of the stuff from a meeting 2 months ago, and so I think there needs to be a little continuity there.
Yeah, I've got short-term and medium-term memory issues, so either one would be a challenge. All right, how do the rest of y'all feel? Do we need to, is there any consensus to that, or does anybody rather wait to December?
I think, well, keep momentum going, so next month would be okay. Keep going.
Any objections? Good. We got some enthusiasm to meet more often. That's a good thing. So we'll plan on holding a November meeting and get to you on that. And again, a lot of the nature of the agenda is going to some degree depend on how far we get tonight. So we'll leave that open at the moment. I also want, before I forget, get Liz upset with me, we have an emergency exit over here that you can see, and we may have some weather event tonight. It doesn't, with my great prognostication and weather skills, it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad, but if something were to happen, we can be taken to an area of safety through those doors, and we'll follow the folks. So we're in the right place, actually, to be, if something is going to happen. We probably won't lose power here, would be my guess. Those of you who are interested who couldn't make it tonight, please let us know, or let Elba or Liz know if you'd like to schedule another tour. Some of you couldn't make the facility tour. With that, I guess we're ready to commence the discussion of rates, and I want to turn that over to Mike Boland, who's the Vice President for Utility Advancement. Mike?
Well, thank you. I am Mike Boland, Vice President of Utility Advancement here at KUB. One of the areas that I'm over at this point is the rates group. I have Sherry Ottinger back here behind me. That's the manager of rates. She'll probably be correcting me as I talk. I started with KUB back in the mid-'80s, and my first initial job at KUB was in the rates area. So I was there for about 3 years, then moved on to mainly working in gas. Over my career here, I've worked with TVA pretty much the whole career, and a lot of their rate stuff over time, so a whole lot more familiar with electric rates than anything else. But I'm here to talk about rates, or at least start the conversation with rates. And when I say conversation, I mean that sincerely I'm not here to lecture or anything else. I'm here to have a conversation. And it really won't work unless you ask questions. So with that, let me go ahead and get started here. I thought that the best way to start off is make sure that we talk about, okay, let's level set. Let's everybody look at a KUB bill. Let's start with that fundamental thing, I guess. If you're like me, you very well may be having your KUB bill on auto pay, where it's automatically coming out of your checking account. It could be that you may be getting electronically, and honestly, you never even look at it. So I wanted to start out by letting everybody look at a KUB bill and have a conversation about it. So let's start that way. This particular bill has all 4 services. That bill format is something we came up with, I guess, 3 years ago now. In my career here, we keep changing the bill format to provide more and more information, honestly. I mean, used to the KUB bill was very small and didn't have a whole lot of granularity to it. But the technology's allowed us to do a lot more things to it. You can see the bill's divided out by utility, electric, gas, water, and wastewater. It shows this month's usage and this month's usage compared to the same month last year, last month's usage, and compared to the same month last year as well, so you can get a sense of your usage. I would point out that if you're interested in usage in more detail, KUB has a portal where you can go in and look at your usage on even an hourly basis on some utilities to see what you're using, so you can look for ways to conserve energy. So there's a good web portal out there today. I'll make that pitch for our IT folks. But if you look at the bill, it shows when your meter was read, what the billing period consists of, the dates, back and forth, and then it talks about how much your usage was in each of the utilities, and then it shows the computation of your rates. This particular bill, if you look at it over there and highlighted in green, which would normally be on your bill as well, in green, that's the total amount that's owed. And since it's all rounded off to a 00 number there, this customer's participating in our rounded up program to make donations to weatherizations for folks. So that's this particular bill. Let me go to each bill individually, if you will. You know, a bill in all 4 of our services consists of 2 basic parts: a basic service charge and a usage rate. And right now I'm talking about residential bills. If we were in the business realm, there's a whole lot more complexity to it, so I'm just limiting my discussion today to residential bills. But on the left here, right here, you see that's the actual rate schedule. We put that up here to have a reference point. I will tell you, all of our rate schedules are on the website. If a person has an interest in seeing those, you can go to our website and see them. And actually, there's a section on the website that says "Understand Your KUB Bill" as well. So all this is sort of on the website out there right today. So in this electric bill, you'll see that they used 1,053 kWh. Computing what the amount is, looking at the rate schedule, it's the basic service charge of $20.50 per month, plus, which shows up over here, plus your usage of 1,053 times the rate in the rate schedule over here. And you add those 2 things up, and it's $117.26. So all of our bills have the same, all of our rates, residential rates, have the same sort of format right there. Interesting to note that we have 4 utility services. Only one of those utility services are subject to sales tax. That's water. That's a state law issue. That's the only one that's taxed by state law. So, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Mike, what's in the basic service charge number? What's in that number?
There's two main components. The first thing is customer type charges. So the cost of your meter reading, billing, call center, customer-related type functions is one big category of costs there. The second category of costs there is what I would say the infrastructure required just to have utility service available to your house. There's a cost just to have it there ready when you flip the switch, something comes on. So it's a combination of those two major cost categories reflect the basic service charge. The electric service charge, electric KWH charge is and particularly in electric, it's a function of TVA's wholesale costs plus a recovery of what you actually use then and the costs of ours associated with that. But
why does it change per season?
TVA bills us differently by season, and that's a reflection of their costs to us. And you know, at least on electric, it's not. Whoops. At least on electric, it's not very significant if you look at the difference between the seasons. And in fact, you know, I think TVA's put stuff out there as almost as placeholders. A lot of things they bill us are the same, but they got different titles to them, so that I think someday they're planning to come back and actually change some of those rates. So you'll see the transition period and winter period here, for example, have the same rate, but those are spelled out in TVA stuff. So I assume that someday they're going to come back and change their rates, and they already got the category set up, is what I think they're doing there. But that's where that comes from. And again, that may not look like a whole lot of difference in price there, but you know, we sell like 5 billion kilowatt hours. The 5 billion times just a little change is a lot of money there. So, but again, I should have answered shortly. It's because of TVA. Yes.
And I assume we'll get into this at some point. First of all, does KUB have any intention of providing actually more real-time pricing to customers?
Certain customers already have that. The largest industrial customers, if they're on the right rate schedule, have access to real-time pricing. There are real-time pricing rate schedules from TVA. We have started venturing that way a little bit, if you will. We're now offering a pilot time of use rate schedule for residentials, but and industrial and even largest commercial customers have access to a time of use type rate schedule as well. But the real-time pricing really is more for industrials at this point.
So the time of use rate, what is your thinking on expanding that?
Well, right now we're trying to get people to accept it. You know, it's a pilot. We had hoped that there would be a larger take-up than what there is. We initially mailed out and made aware all the people that are on EVs and solar and people that you would think that it would be automatically a win for them almost because their usage is already shifted one way or they have the ability to shift. We sent invitations to all those. We started sending invitation I say invitation, we started making people aware, you know, by direct mailers to some small commercial customers as well. The intention with the board passing the pilot wholesale pilot time use rate schedule was just that, as a pilot to try to figure out what works and what sells. If I don't have a slide of our time use rate schedule, but if I did, it's a fairly significant difference between peak and off-peak. And for those of you that don't know what a time use rate schedule is, a time use rate schedule, if I was looking at this rate right here, and instead of summer, that said peak period. Instead of winter, it said off-peak period. Well, the peak period under our rate schedule might be 19 cents. And our off-peak period, that right here, might be 6 cents. And so if you're using power during the on-peak period, which I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but let's say it's from 4 to 8 in the afternoon or something like that. It may be bigger, maybe 6 hours. Sherry would know. Pardon? It's 2 to 8. Is it 2 to 8? Okay, okay. There's a winter, it goes to summer to winter. That's right. But and any weekends off peak, holidays are off peak. Are you on it, Kent?
You know, I'm not.
Okay.
But I looked at it, and
Yeah.
actually, I want to thank your employees, I guess, because there was someone who hooked me up, because I did it as part of a pilot,
Yeah,
and they looked at my usage over a year.
Right.
And they found out that it would cost me a bunch more money to be on the time of use. Now, I think the year they measured was before we started using our home car charger.
yeah.
And so I believe that the time of use program would benefit us now. But I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
One thing that would help everybody, whether they got an electric car or not, is to have a time of use switch on an electric hot water heater, which are commercially available, I think at Lowe's right now. If they do that, then they would get an enormous advantage out of being on time of use.
Well, truthfully, if you just look at the general population of residential customers out there right now, depending on your lifestyle, you may already be opposite of the world. You know, when we first moved here, my wife worked 11 to 7 at St. Mary's, and she'd come home at 7 in the morning and go to bed when everybody's getting up.
Right.
And I was a student at UT, and we lived opposite of everybody else. I think we could have saved money without doing anything on a time-use rate schedule, just because we were opposite. Now, it's intended really to provide incentive for people to shift their load, okay? Because, and so why do we charge more during a peak period? Well, because TVA charges us more. I mean, really, it's a reflection of our power costs is what it is. And if we can lower our demand from TVA, and I'm getting in technical terms here, but if we can lower our peak usage from TVA, then we can pass on those savings to customers that help us do that. So it's not intended to be an automatic winner. It's intended to be a mechanism that at least allows people that want to try to shift their load, like you said, by having a hot water heater with like a Nest thermostat that sets it back and only runs it, lets it pre-warm before the peak period, and then you drift through the peak period. There's a lot of technologies out there now that a time use rate is really made for. I mean, there's people with smart thermostats. You can tell the smart thermostat when it needs to pre-cool your house, so it sort of drifts a little higher during the peak period, and then it'll kick back on when the peak period's off. Or you don't do your you set your dishwasher where it starts after the peak period. You can time your dishwasher. You can do a lot of technology things out there that can change the shape of your load. If you were looking at electric rate schedules, and what TVA really wants is they want steady loads, is what they're looking for. So any mechanism that sort of flattens your load costs, anything that flattens your load means we incur less cost from TVA, which then if you're on a time use rate schedule, we can share with the customer that's doing that. So I can preach about time use rates a lot. I think, and one of the reasons I think you may have brought it up is that's the way of the future. In fact, if I had all my slides here, and y'all do, I don't know if the last slide says time of use somewhere. Well, no, it doesn't on this one, but the last slide I'm going to bring up is time of use. The future trends. Time of use is one of the things I think right now it's a pilot. Right now it's not mandatory. Where the world's headed, it's going to be common, and it might be the choice. But that's far in the future. But we're trying to get there.
Yeah, so Mike, I mean, you're correct. One of the reasons I brought it up is that part of the encouragement for wanting to have this rate conversation was that there is some sensitivity to low-income customers, there's some sensitivity to environmental impacts, and obviously sending the proper market signal and trying to gently nudge people to do things that can both save money and help the environment is critically important. So I think it's really important that people understand that TVA, if I'm not mistaken, and I guess I'd want to ask, can you all make your rate agreement with TVA visible to everybody? Can we get a copy of sort of how they are charging you on time the time period, because that, my understanding is that a number of years back, they really put a lot of weight on that demand charge for the LPCs, the local power companies, which you all are one of, and that there is a mechanism there that if you were able to really get your demands down, that there's a great deal of savings. Now, how and whether y'all pass that along to their customers obviously is to be determined, but my understanding is that that is actually one of the strategies that if we were to look for ways to save people money, and we were to look for ways to sort of get off, and then getting off of TVA's peak also has environmental benefits, because that's when they're ramping fossil fuel plants and other things like that. So there's a number of these things. So as we're looking at this rate discussion, I think it's really important to pause and grab hold of those variables that actually can be manipulated and can be adjusted. And so the time of use rate and getting off of demand peak times is one of those things that I think is not yet being fully exploited.
It's not, and let me expand a little bit on the environmental side of that. If y'all didn't pick up exactly what he was saying, when TVA runs their units, they start out, it's nuclear. That sucker's running full out all the time, is what it does. As they add load, as more and more people turn on lights and do things, then they have to bring on other generation resources that are higher priced. Okay, so they might bring on the hydro units, depending on the time of the year, because that's cheap. They got wind contracts that are coming in that must take. Eventually, they get into coal contracts. Fire plants will be in there. Some baseload gas will be in there. And then as they get really hot afternoon, they might have some oil-fired burners. They only burn 50 hours a year. And generally speaking, if you were to look at the environmental aspects of their generation fleet, as Mr. Smith was saying, it gets worse as you go up the stack. And so to the extent TVA is able to have a pretty flat load, not only is it cheaper for TVA and for us, which then reflected to y'all, it's also more environmentally friendly. That's just the reality. And so the more we as the Valley can keep our loads flat, the better the environment will be. That's just kind of fundamental. Now, people talk about, well, maybe they ought to get batteries to help. There's a lot of new technologies that are going to help with some of that stuff, but rates is certainly one way of getting at it. And again, I think that the technologies out there that people are able to take advantage of makes it a little easier to shift your load around to where you're more flat. If you think about your house, there's two obvious spikes. There's a spike when you get up, there's a spike when you come home. And those spikes are also seasonal in that the morning spikes are worse during the winter and the afternoon spikes are worse during the summer. And I know a bunch of y'all took a tour of the dispatch center over there. I don't know if they showed you, but I mean, there's a big number showing over there. This is how much we're pulling from TVA right now. I don't know if they showed y'all that or not, but that's part of the monitors. And when it gets to a certain level, they can do a few things to manage the peak. To answer some of your other questions, Dr. Smith, TVA does charge us a demand charge. And what a demand charge is, and Terry's very familiar with demand charges, working at UT, but what a demand charge is, it's a charge that's based upon our peak usage. So there's a whole lot of our costs from TVA is driven by our peak usage during the month. Whatever our peak is some huge percent of what we take, what we're billed from TVA. It's not as much as what it used to be. TVA lowered it to some extent. They lowered it because I'm not sure if they were afraid that people were going to take advantage of things. It's not as high as it was. If it was much higher, then people would have incentives to do even more drastic measures. I don't know. I don't want to get into what I think TVA might be doing, but there is certainly economics around sending signals to customers to alter their usage, to lower our costs from TVA, and the time use rates gives us the ability then to flow those savings back to the people that are helping us do that. So that's the advantage of time of use. Actually, we could bring next time we meet, because I think it's going to be many times, but I think that I could bring a copy of the rate schedule from time of use, and everybody could more visualize what it is as opposed to what's up there right now. But we've had a hard time getting people to do it. There's actually a tool on our website now. If somebody correct me, Sherry, is there a tool on our website where we can calculate it?
It'll compare your.
Yeah, there's actually a tool out there now that you can go and you can look at the time use rate schedule. You can look at the tool, it'll pull up your 12-month history, it'll do a calculation for it. But now, just like Kent said he did that, when he did that, it wasn't going to be a savings. I'm telling you, it's not going to, it shouldn't, unless you're opposite of the world, it's not going to be a savings unless you move your consumption around. That's just how it works. Now, there's some people that it fits better than others. For example, if you have solar on your house, solar's producing electricity during hot summer afternoons when we are peaking, when TVA's peaking. So you're almost automatically going to have a little bit of savings in a time use rate schedule there with solar. If you've got an EV, the benefit of having an EV in a time use rate schedule is you can program your charger to charge it off peak. I mean, it's a real easy sort of thing to do. So if you got a smart thermostat, you can do that. There are parts of the country where the utilities send signals to people's smart thermostats and automatically sort of does time use for them, if you will. There's just lots of technology changes that are coming that we've been shielded from here at TVA land, but it's all coming here. There are already some, TVA has 153 distributors. We're one of 153. And there are a couple of TVA distributors that already have time of use as a default. Now, their time of use would be something like, okay, you see where this says 9.1, let's say they might have that as 10, and that'd be peak. And their off-peak would be 9.9. Okay, that's, you can have differentials there and call it a time of use, and some of them have time of use rates where there's not a whole lot of differential there. When we designed our rates, and again, it's a pilot, we have a very significant differential between the peak and off-peak so that there's incentive there. If you're just really basically got a flat rate, nobody really cares. My mother lives in Middle Tennessee, and her utility, which I pay, her utilities has time of use, and every month it says what she did on peak, off-peak, and has the bill associated with that. Does she know? Is she adjusting her lifestyle? No. Why? Well, because there's nothing there, So we can have a whole session on time of use.
But Mike, my best example, I guess, of peak, off-peak was my dad, because he turned that thermostat down, up, whatever, because he paid the bill.
Yeah.
But how do you work together with the customer to enlighten the customer, telling me that there's a website out there and you can go in there and you can punch in your numbers and calculate it, does nothing for me unless someone helps me to get through that, meaning I put my pastor hat on, that I could go to my congregation and say, bring your bills in and we can sit down and we can go through that. I can work with them, and that's part, I guess, what I'm getting out of this is how can I help my congregation, and then how can they help someone else to try to work this system. And you're right, some of it may not change, because if you got somebody at home all day, it may not change, but COVID changed a lot of things. More people are at home now.
Yeah.
Because I remind my wife, now that you're working from home, you know, the bills goes up. So I'm trying to understand, how do we work together with you, the community, to get this out, to get people to at least run this tool once and just see if it helps them?
Well, first of all, we did reach out to people that to a core group of folks that we thought it might work for from the start. Again, this is a pilot. Part of what we're trying to figure out is what is the differential between, again, I'm pointing at this, peak, what's a differential, the delta, between a peak and an off-peak that's going to give people incentive?
Right.
You know, right now, we got a real significant difference. And it may be so significant it's scaring people from being a part of it, because they're worried, oh, what if I mess up? Then all of a sudden I'm going to be really, really in pain. So we haven't gone crazy with it as far as trying to get everybody on board just yet, because we don't know if we got a product that works just yet.
Okay.
We had a conversation with somebody at UT, I forget, that wants to do a marketing campaign and study what does it take to get people to do it. We may move forward with that, but we have created the tool. I think it's pretty easy to use, although I haven't done it. I don't know. We're looking for volunteers.
Well,
If
I'm
anybody
looking-
here wants to volunteer, I'll sign you up.
Mike, I'm looking at, we just left, walking through, having a tour of the customer service place. If you got a person that's calling in and they're struggling with paying their bill, and they're looking for other ways to make payments, that might be a person that's a candidate to say, have you tried? Let's pull it up now. And maybe there's another group that does that and say, work with Miss Ann and run and see if that will help her. I don't know if you all do that, and I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get this out and see if it does work?
Yeah.
Exactly right. And it came out of the conversation with you too, Stephen, that how do you communicate it?
Yeah.
And I think that right now, at least the way it was communicated to me was technical. And as a technical thing, I looked at it, and I looked at my family. I got a family of super jocks. I mean, these people do some laundry. It was difficult for me to calculate exactly how I would get the behavior modification, because I think that's the thing to communicate.
Yes.
We want you to modify your behavior, and here's how you can really make this a winner for yourself. And that, I think, is the kind of the marketing message, if you like. And that's something I think volunteers in the environmental community might be interested in participating with that. I was talking to a group of people at Drive Electric Tennessee, and they want to go and have sessions in churches in East Knoxville about electric cars and how you charge them and how you can get used electric cars more cheaply and all the stuff about it. Because
Right.
people, we go to fish fries over at Seed, and people are interested. Why, you got that Tesla, and we're talking about the electric cars. And my friend JD, who's one of the leaders over there, his wife Keisha is a natural EV advocate. And I think we need a TOU advocate as well, and to actually go through the messaging with you guys to make sure we get the details right, and then set up ways to communicate this to customers who might not be the ones who are likely to participate. I think my family will do it, but we got to have a few conversations first.
Well, if you read the literature, the utility type literature out there, in Europe, they're already there. Everything's already time of use. Everybody has already got their lifestyle around, you don't do this at this time. And they got there because of rates. I think if you go in other areas like California, you would find a whole lot of time of use type utilization.
3-tiered.
Yeah, well, you could have a super peak. You could
Yeah,
have,
that's
yeah,
what-
you could have
that's
a
what they
super
had.
peak.
Yeah.
As well as, ours doesn't have a super peak. What we need to shorten the on-peak period, but have a super peak in the middle. I don't know what we need to do, but we're trying. I mean, we're trying to figure it out. We haven't been successful yet. I'm not giving up because we launched it. Did we launch it like in October 1st of 2020 and the pandemic hit? Okay, yeah, November 1st? Okay, November 1st. We launched a lot of things right about the same time we did the Green Match program. I ain't got many people signed up for that yet either. I mean, the pandemic's kind of messed with us on a few things, but, yeah, next time I'll bring if nothing else, so you can see what our time of use rate looks like. And it's available for small commercials as well, if I remember right.
Most of our participants are commercial.
Most of our participants are commercial because they seem to have more of an appetite for looking at them, doing the pencils
Right.
and this kind of stuff. So, yeah, most participants at this point are small commercial customers.
I'm sorry, I still think we're missing a target. If you got elderly people, they don't have computers in their houses, most of them. They don't even know how to use a computer. So if Ms. Ann calls into the customer service and said, I'm having trouble paying my bill this month, and it's explained to them, well, you can use this program, that goes right over their head, that's not gonna help them. So I go back to saying, how can we work together to get this word out? Because I'm down the road now thinking how I can pull my congregation together, bring the laptop in, bring your bill in, and let's run this program. Because I'm curious now, is it user-friendly? Is it simplistic to where somebody can really just sit down and do it within 5-10 minutes? Or are you sitting there pulling your hair out trying to figure out what keystroke to punch in it? It may not be user-friendly, I don't know.
I
But
don't
I'm
know
gonna
either.
find
Somebody
out.
here probably knows. Anybody know?
So I'm gonna find out.
We've taken the hard part out of it for customers. We obviously know your consumption information, so we essentially can log into your account and tell us you're interested in the program, and then we spit out the report for you. So it doesn't require you to know anything about your usage, and it will show you, like in red or green, you are gonna save by staying with your.
But how do they get their report? How do they get there? How do they get there?
There are a couple of ways. You can do it online, like
Okay.
you mentioned, but if you call one of our call center representatives, they can run that report as well, and they can talk you through.
And they can do it while they're on the phone, right?
A lot of times though, they will, disconnect that call and call you back because they want to make sure that they do the proper analysis. So they'll do that report and then they'll follow back up with you. We will mail it to someone if they want paper. So your example of an older, individual that isn't gonna have email, that's something that we can mail to them and we'll mail it to them so that they can look at it. And when they receive it, we will get on another phone call with them and talk them through what that means.
Okay, let me add another piece. I don't know if anybody's looked at it. How hard would it be, I don't know, pick an area and send them papers, just send it to them. You would have saved $50 this month or $20 this month had you done this. Instead of waiting on someone to call and ask for it. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
We've actually done that for our commercial customers specifically.
Okay.
Well,
Because the thing is, if most people, I say most, the vast majority of people are on normal, what we call normal schedules, they're gonna pay more with this program if they keep their lifestyle. So it'll be actually be.
without behavior
That have changed.
modification.
So we give them a negative bill, they'd be like, oh, it's all red.
I mean, if
And so,
everybody
yeah.
just takes advantage of the savings by doing nothing, there's not really savings to give.
Right.
Right, I got you. I
Okay?
understand.
So in order for it to really work, people have to change their behavior. There are certainly certain lifestyles that it's just a given, but for most people, they would have to work and change their behaviors in order to save money. Just plain out tell you,
Right.
that's the way it works. But there is the opportunity there. And at this point, You know, if we had 200,000 people that wanted us to do this, which I guess is, I don't know how many residential customers we got, 180,000, let's say. If we had 180,000 customers who wanted us to bill them this way today, we probably couldn't do it, just because it's a more complicated billing routine. That's the reason why we're trying to do a pilot. We're trying to do 2 or 3 things. We're trying to figure out what differential works for people. Maybe we have to eventually get a super peak, which some of you know what a super peak is, and you know, I don't want to bore everybody. And then maybe there's something to the whole idea of selling it. You know, we really, I don't think, are trying to sell it at this point. We're just wanting to make it available as a tool for people who want to manage their bills, is what we're after. But we just hadn't got enough, we haven't got enough take-up yet to have a sense of what we need to do.
How many people are signed up?
I think residential is less than 20, and it's over 100 on the commercial side.
Less than 20 people, or less than 20%?
20 people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will take ownership of the fact, I was completely unaware that y'all were doing it.
Oh.
And so that, you know, you send me something in your mailer, there's not a guarantee that I'm gonna read it, because I'm not,
Yeah,
you know,
I
I'm not like,
understand.
oh
Yeah, you
boy, I got something
shake the
KUB.
envelope
can
and
you-
all the stuff
whatever.
falls out of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how y'all are marketing it, and I think that, you know, based on your description, I would probably be one of your target audience.
Yeah.
That you're, and completely oblivious to it. So take that for what it's worth, that it, whatever y'all did, it didn't penetrate. And, you know, and then again, I think there's several people that if you actually were to take the time to explain it to us to where we could understand, you might be able to have some strategic partners to be able to actually rapidly change that number of 20. Because y'all may not be the best messengers, even though you think you are. It may be that you need some other validators that are actually going to push the message that will help people break through. So it's just food for thought. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that if you guys really want to make it work, I think you got to do more than a mailer.
Well, we haven't been on social media like we would do on a lot of things. We haven't done all kinds of stuff like we would do if we were trying to push out, say, the Green Switch Match program. Because we really wanted, if we got 100 people, I would be thrilled. That's enough for us to see how the billing system works, for us to see, are people able to do the behavior changes, you know, are people satisfied? I really don't want lots of people. So we really haven't, per se, marketed it. We tried to direct mail people to date. That's all I think we've done.
You know, this is obviously a topic of real interest, and I guess that my observation, we're really early. I mean, a pilot of 20 is, you know, you're really just getting the contours of this, or you didn't intend 20. That's what you've got right now on the residential side. So maybe we could just put this aside and get a little more data on it, and probably have a topic of a conversation a little later on, because I know you've got a whole lot else to get to.
Just one question. Who's the point of contact that if I can find another 20, 40, who's the point of contact for that? That'd be Tiffany? Okay, Miss Tiffany. Okay, thank you.
Tiffany's fine.
Okay,
I'll get you my card.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's the electric bill and the way the structure is today. And again, I'm just talking about residential customers here. Natural gas bill, same sort of format. Here's the rate schedule itself. That's out on the website. There's a basic service charge of $10.90. The commodity charge, there's a summer-winter split here based upon our costs from pipeline suppliers. The commodity rate here in highlight is shown for the summer, this summer bill times that rate, $33.48 for the natural gas usage on this customer. Stepping through water, it's all the same way. This one a little different than what you saw before because there's 2 different blocks. And when we say blocks, Water, wastewater, and gas have blocked rates where there is a differential between the first usage and some of the later usage. So in this particular customer case, they have used 6 CCF of water. The rate schedule calls for the first 2 CCF at $1.10, anything over 2 CCF at $2.80. So when you do the bill, it's the basic service charge plus the first 2 CCF, since there's more than 2, it's 2 CCF at $1.10 right there, and everything above 2 CCF is at $2.80. So 6 minus the 2 is 4, so 4 CCF times $2.80. And again, since this is water, there's sales tax added to that particular bill. Water and wastewater both have a inclining type block rate structure to it. In other words, the excess usage is a higher cost than the initial usage. And if you were to look at water utilities around the nation, you would find very similar structure to water and wastewater type utilities, where there's for 2 different reasons. In a certain part of the country, water is very scarce, and they want to incent people to use as little as they can. So the baseline sort of usage is at a small rate, and then anything above that's at a higher rate to dissuade usage. A lot of other utilities that are doing the same thing would have a rate structure like this, similar to us, where it's really intended to have a base usage of just toilet flushing and stuff at a lower cost than usage above that. So it's fairly common on the structure right here. Yeah.
That 2 CCS line, I feel like as long as I've looked at it, it's always been 2.
It has.
How do you evaluate that line, and how long has it been since?
It's been, I've been here longer than anybody in the room, and it was there when I got here. So that's what I'd say to that, Aaron. When our rate consultant came in and did our last cost of service, he didn't even have he didn't even put a block in there. He just said, well, this is what you ought to charge, and it's all flat. Maybe over time, if we have a rate increase, we fill that in so it's the same. But there is, I don't have a problem with it existing the way it continues to exist. The average consumption for water is probably around 5. Is that about right?
About 3,500 gallons of water.
Yeah, about 5. But there are certainly probably, help me out, Sherry, like 20-something% that's under 2? 33% of our customers are 2 CCF or less. So to the extent you do much of anything there, you're targeting that 33% of customers with what you're doing there. So you have to be careful. It's like everything with rates, and this is I got a slide on it at some point here. Anything you do with rates, you got to do gradually. I mean, like if we were to just say, okay, let's have it a flat rate here, and let's make it a flat rate of $2.40, just assuming the math works. You're really targeting one set of customers over others when you do things like that. So you really got to kind of ease into things and do things over a long period of time, lest you, dislocate people unnecessarily in one big implementation. And I got a little bullet about that here. Gradualism. Gradualism is a good thing in rates. Change things gradually. Do it gradually. I know Terry here, he's got UT over there, and what does UT do? Well, they do annual budgets, and they do annual budgets, 6 months before the next year they'll do their budget. And, in order for people to do budgets, they need to kind of know what to budget. And so when we do rates, we try to do them well ahead of time. We try to do them gradual so that when people like Terry are doing their budgets, they kind of know what's coming, and we're not giving them the sticker shock. If it's coming from us. When things happen in the power world or the gas world, I can't help that sort of stuff, but our stuff I can help. And we try to be very gradual and very vocal about pending changes. So for example, to build on that, recently, our board agreed to raise rates to install fiber on the electric system. And I think maybe you all had presentations about that. And we talked to some customers, some larger customers, and they say, well, gosh, I'm good with that, and I understand everything, but dang it, we just got our budget approved, and I don't really have that in my budget now, and we passed that with it's not even going into effect till next April, right? So we passed it with 7 months in advance, and they're complaining because they didn't have enough notice. And I understand, but we hear that enough to try to be as far notice as we can and as gradual as we can, knowing that that's a real life thing out there. So anyway, I preach too much, and I apologize. Yeah.
Mike, why on the natural gas does the commodity charge go down? The usage.
We try to recover, in the wintertime, we're trying to recover all of our storage costs early in the deal so we can make sure we recover them. Yes, just to be honest with you. In the summertime, there's hardly anybody that goes above 50 therms. We could flatten that out and we wouldn't affect anybody at all right there to speak of. But that's what it is. You're recovering the bulk of your costs right there in the first 30 therms. And you got a pretty good shot at getting it recovered because most everybody has greater than 30 therms. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, it's just.
Seems like there's a different
It's different than
logic
the water,
to each of them.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You tell me a whole different paradigm of charging.
Absolutely. Each utility has its own nuances. The electric rates are pretty much predicated on TVA, honestly. I mean, if you think about it, TVA is like 80% of your bill. 70 to 80% of your bill is TVA costs that we're going to get from you or we're going to give it to TVA. So what our electric rates and our electric bill kind of really is predicated pretty much on TVA and what they do. Gas, natural gas side, it's similar but not as dramatic. Natural gas side is 50-something%, and correct me if I'm wrong back there, but it's something like that is natural gas costs and natural gas pipeline costs, natural gas storage costs. So there's a whole lot of those costs that we're trying to collect to make sure we recover. Because on the natural gas side, there's a whole lot of those costs that come to us in the form of fixed costs. That's irrespective of our usage that we need to make sure we get recovered. But yeah, you're right. Every utility has its own nuances on the parts and pieces. So, yeah, Kent?
You say that part of the reason the initial costs are higher is because of storage charges. Is that LNG?
It is part LNG, and I'm using storage charges as a way of saying fixed costs. We're trying to recover our fixed costs, storage being one of those fixed costs. LNG storage, we have a lot of different kinds of storage, but they're all fixed cost contracts where we're paying for the service.
The same amount for the storage service every month?
Yes,
However
12
much
months
is-
a year.
However much is stored, right?
Yes,
right,
it
right.
is.
Now, I remember learning about that because actually you gave the first presentation I ever heard at a KUB board meeting
Oh, really?
when there was a pipe rupture in Smith County.
Oh.
And I remember that staff and board were somewhat concerned because had there been a big temperature drop later on and had they not fixed the pipe.
That's exactly
then there could
right.
have been a real difficulty in town
Yeah.
with people getting their,
Well,
keeping their houses warm.
Just as an aside, since you brought that up, that same section of pipe right now is flowing zero. They got that piece of pipe down right now today. Thank goodness it's not cold, but they've been doing maintenance work on that, and right now we've got the same thing going on through October 25th, I believe. Oh, yeah. It's supposed to be back in service October 25th, but
All right. So
you're exactly
getting the
right.
gas from storage now?
Yes, well, and yes.
Okay.
So Mike, help me understand something, and I know we're gonna do a deeper dive and it'll be a much more robust conversation on the fixed fees. Fixed fees for water, $10, fixed fees for gas, $10. I know why the fixed fees for wastewater are so high because of the consent decree and all
Yeah.
the work you had to done. So why are you keeping them so low, but yet you ran up the electric fixed fee?
Well, actually, first of all, let me correct you a little bit. Water, I think, is $18. It's not 10.
Is it? Okay.
And in the case of natural gas, and they all have different stories, as we talked about. If you were to go backward in time on natural gas and look at the basic service charge, that's what we call it instead of fixed fees, but if you could look at the basic service charge back in time, I think it was around $5. So it's gone up as well. The capital requirements, and we'll, really this third night probably might get into what's caused those to go up. But I would say in the natural gas side, as compared to electric and water, and more dramatically at all, wastewater, there hasn't been the need for all the capital expenditures to modernize and to, do the infrastructure. I guess infrastructure is the right word nowadays, to make the infrastructure investments, so you haven't had the need to raise the basic service charge as high as the other utilities. It's really a function of expenditures on pipe. It hadn't been necessary in natural gas as
The
it
gas
is.
capital budgets haven't been as high. Water, wastewater, and electric are more capital.
Intensive, yeah.
And gas is a relatively newer system compared to the other three systems, so the level of investment required hasn't been as great.
Yeah. And I've got some charts in the later presentation that demonstrate that pretty dramatically. In fact, it's been very dramatic. I don't know what y'all have heard in other meetings or whatever, but if you go back in time and look at our capital spending, our debt levels, our everything, there's been a dramatic upshift in our debt and our rates, both. And that's because of conscious decisions to make some investments in our infrastructure that's now being talked about nationwide. We were kind of ahead of the curve a little bit.
Right, but, and we don't need to debate this right now, but the fixed fee is not the only mechanism to recover those costs. You can obviously recover those costs in the variable rate.
You can.
So whether you use the fixed fee or the variable rate to recover the cost is a policy choice by the company, as opposed to whether you actually get to recover the revenue from the spend. Because just because you spent more doesn't mean you can't recover it in the variable rate equally well as if you recovered the fixed fee. So let's just be, again, we should be clear about the fixed fee is not the magic way to recover revenue, because nobody has argued that y'all shouldn't recover revenue.
Right.
It's how you're recovering the revenue, and you have different choices, policy choices that you make about that revenue recovery. So whether you spend more money or not, nobody's saying don't collect
Right.
money. It's how you use policy to structure your rate recovery. That's the issue.
And
And the only thing I would say, Steve, is that it's a policy decision that the board has made, rather than saying it's a policy decision that the companies make, because the board has looked at a lot of data and a lot of information about how we do recover those costs and which one we think is a better model for our customers, because of what we hear from the customers about when they have the hardest times paying their bills.
Well, I look forward to debate that, because, a lot of the fixed fee went up before you even did a cost of service study. And then my discussion with board members, most board members didn't know the difference between the minimal service method versus the basic method of evaluating, how you recover those costs. So, again, I think that's one of these deeper dives that we'll want to do.
Now, I understand, and I don't mean to get into a debate. I'm just saying that, to be correct, I think we've got to say it's a board's decision rather than you may be saying the same thing when you're saying company, but it is something that's come before the board and that there's been a lot of discussion on. So, sorry, that's the only thing else.
well, and I would say before this talking about rates is all over with, that's certainly something that we all got to talk about. I mean, that's somewhat what brought everybody to the table of interest in that, and I'm certainly prepared to talk about that and give history and explanation. But
Yeah, I think we have a slide, probably be next time.
yeah,
Walk through the.
no, probably not next time.
Not next time.
Probably not.
2 times from now.
Probably.
That'll be 23 when we get to that.
But that's good. I'm glad everybody's asking questions, because I really, everybody needs to be educated on this if you have an interest in it. And there are obviously people in the room that know more about it than other people. And I should have pointed that out to start with, that Terry, for example, has represented for quite a long time, not only the University of Tennessee in dealings with TVA in particular, but also even the whole industrial group associated with TVA customers, AVI, I guess. Terry was the president of AVI for a number of years, and then he remained as their rate guy for the Associated Valley Industries for a number of years. So Terry has a great deal of expertise, particularly on the TVA rate schedules, and heard all kinds of stuff. Dr. Smith clearly has practiced in this area for a long, long time, particularly in front of state commissions, I guess, as opposed to municipals. But rates are rates. There's just different formats and forms for having discussions in other jurisdictions. So they have a little bit more advantage of knowing things, and I hope that as we answer their questions, I'm not bypassing y'all and you know, talking stuff that you don't understand. So if I do, just let me know. So.
Can I ask another question on natural gas?
Yep.
Does this one fluctuate more than other utilities? My intuition would say yes, that like this is one that like spikes and then bottoms out.
Well,
but is that correct?
If
or
anybody's
not?
been reading anything in the press anymore, of course, I'm really into reading gas sort of stuff, but you know, right now gas prices are really rocketed up. Back in May, we were paying $2.50-ish, Sherry, and now the current price of natural gas is like $5. So, you know, you can look at what's going on with the gas pump, natural gas kind of doing the same thing. Now, so your natural gas bills are going to be a lot higher this year than what they were last year as a result of market forces. When you say natural gas prices are going to go up, it also implies your electricity prices are going to go up. TVA uses natural gas increasingly to generate electricity, so you will see your electricity prices go up as well. It won't be nearly as dramatic because TVA generates a lot with nuclear and they generate a lot with hydro. You know, natural gas is not as big a percentage of their generation, but as you asked, there is more volatility in pricing associated with natural gas.
And then what about consumption? Is that also, I mean, I was thinking about like summer versus winter on natural gas, where
Yeah.
you're maintaining an infrastructure all year round, you're monitoring for gas leaks all year round, but you have to recover your cost in a much smaller band of time.
That's also correct. In our natural gas system, on a peak day, we might have 130,000 of sales, 125,000 decatherms of natural, 125,000 of sales. And during an average summer day, we might have 18,000 in sales. So you got a huge differential between a peak and an average during the summer. On the electric side, we might have 1,300 megawatts of cells at a peak, and an average summer day, you might have 800, 700, Gabe? 700. So that's a kind of differential in electric. So gas by itself is very peaky because it's very temperature sensitive. Electric, you have so much just Game Boys and all that kind of stuff pulling power all the time that there's a base load of power being used out there. Maybe not Game Boys, that's a battery thing, but
You gotta charge better.
I am the eldest in the room, that's right. To answer Terry's question, yeah, one of the things that we've done historically is hedge our gas prices by fixing the price or agreeing to a fixed price for like a 12-month period of time, and we'll do that for a little piece. Next month, we'll do another piece, a 12-month fixed price. So you stack these different prices on top of themselves, which sort of mitigates the volatility. Now, Terry, we haven't been able to do that much here lately. And the reason why is because, as I told Kent a while ago, the pipeline's cut in two right now over there. And so we can no longer hedge because we don't have the certainty of flow. And that's been the case now ever since the pipeline erupted 2 or 3 years ago now. 3 years ago. That our ability to do that kind of hedging has been really hindered. So what happens if you do those kind of transactions and then the pipe is ruptured, then you have nowhere to put that gas, and it's a real financial problem. Because you committed to purchase it. So what we normally would be doing isn't as effective right now because of the natural gas pipeline. But yeah, we try to hedge that price. TVA does the same thing on theirs. They hedge their price on their natural gas. They hedge their price on coal and nuclear and everything else. People are trying to keep the rates as low and the volatility down as much as we can. When prices go from $2 to $5, it don't matter what you do, you're going to have changes, just like at the gas pump. You can't escape that sort of stuff.
Mike, you threw out a couple of numbers, and I just want to make sure I heard them earlier. You talked about the electrical system. Were you saying that your winter peak was 1,300, and your summer peak is about 7?
No.
Okay. So
summer average.
Summer and winter peaks are pretty even now.
Yep. I'm talking about average day.
Our average day is about 7.
Yeah.
When you root like today, probably like 7.
Yep.
Okay, so the average is about 700, but you're saying you're dual peaking, and you're
We are dual peaking.
both summer and winter are.
And 1,300 is probably like an all-time high, Gabe.
Okay.
It's probably more like 1,200, 1,150, something like that nowadays. But in any event, it's not that volatile as far as like compared to natural gas.
Okay, I misheard that. Thank you.
Yeah. I probably misspoke, so. Okay, we passed the water. Let's look at wastewater. First of all, wastewater is bad. Yeah, I guess that's right. I think y'all probably already had conversations maybe already about the history of the wastewater system, or maybe you just know that from being around Knoxville for a while. The wastewater system was inherited from the city. The system that was inherited ultimately needed a lot of work. The EPA believed the work needed to be done faster than we did. The EPA said that they're the boss, so we had to speed up the investments or the spending on wastewater, and we borrowed $500 million at the end of the day, and we raised rates now to where it's bad. There's no sugarcoating wastewater. We are not competitive. If you look at our peers, our rates are high. And it's because of the amount of spending we had to do to make sure that we had the type of system that the EPA mandated and ultimately everybody needs to have. It's just the speed at which we had to do it. So that's my personal take on wastewater, but where it shows up where it shows up is, of course, not only in the CCF rates, but also in the basic service charge. And you can't take it. The thing about wastewater, we have less customers on wastewater than any of our other systems. We have more debt on wastewater than any of our other systems. And you can't take those two things, the less customers and the more debt, and have any kind of rates.
Is this tied, Mike, to when the debt being retired at some point and then becoming a little more reasonable?
Well, you know,
I mean, are you paying off a big hunk of debt right now in a 20 whatever? Is it-
unfortunately,
Yeah.
well, again, this is me, and this is a finance guy, I'm not. Unfortunately, what I would say is, in order to try to keep the rates as low as we could, it's 50-year debt.
Oh, 50, wow.
All right, I mean, we tried to stretch this thing out, we tried to keep the rates down as low as we can. We've never done that kind of
Yeah,
debt.
I've never heard of 50 years.
Well, me
Well,
neither. I mean, I don't-
it's not 50.
Okay.
State law only allows us to go to 40. We
Is it 40?
issued 35-year debt for probably the first 6, 7 years, and we transitioned down to 30-year debt. But we got a wastewater bond issue. We'll go to city council here in a few weeks. It's only $12 million compared to some of the large ones we had in the past, but it'll be 30-year bonds. Yeah.
So it's different than.
And
the
you're
average
trying,
utility.
and one thing we were really fortunate, though, is most of that debt was issued in a relatively low interest rate environment. So that actually worked in our favor, and actually rates have continued to go down. So we've had some massive refinancings. We had one just back in March where we knocked off like almost $50 million in wastewater debt. So that was a good thing. We've been able to try to manage that, but we still have, $475 million in outstanding wastewater bonds, and that's got a long tail to it, being paid off, past 2050 in some cases.
Yeah, I exaggerated by the 50, I guess, but,
Yeah.
but
It's-
I
point
told,
is,
I told
yeah.
the truth about
Yes,
it
you
being
did.
a long deal, right?
Yes, you were true.
Okay, so to answer your question, it's
There's no reliefs in sight on that.
I think that's fair.
And since you've been around so long, by your own admission,
I was
This is-
I was involved in the acquisition of the wastewater system.
and I'm surprised that you still talk to anyone at the city. But, I think to the kind of this question of like, you were forced by the consent decree to make what amounts to a 30 plus, maybe even a 50-year investment in the course of 20 years, 15 years?
Less than that.
Less than that.
And do we know the history of Baby Bill? How long did the city not raise its rates that got them into that mess that then they handed over to you? Because I think this goes back to, it's really hard to make those rate adjustments. It never feels good on the board, I know that. But we have our own example in Knoxville of the situation that happens when you don't do those little tiny hard decisions, and then you're forced to make the really expensive, miserable, painful for everyone for 30 years decision.
Well, we took
And-
over a system that was essentially financially bankrupt
Yeah,
and in not the best condition at all. So we
because
had
they
to
had not
raise-
made those steady improvements. I mean,
That's
they hadn't done
correct.
anything. They just let it deteriorate. And I
That's
think,
correct.
Well, and honestly,
this
the
is-
laws were changing along the way, and the attitudes towards what's acceptable and not acceptable has changed along the way. My intention isn't to say anything necessarily bad about what the city did before. I'm just saying it wound up being an issue.
yeah,
And where you're going and what you're saying on all this, Aaron, really hits at the core of changes that were decided by our board coming out of the discussions about wastewater. That was the impetus for a lot of substantial changes in our investment, our capital spending for all of our utilities that came out of the wastewater issues with EPA. And that's a big part of our discussion a little later, getting back again to the whole idea about the fixed costs and why they've gone up and everything. It's all wrapped in together, but I think you're hitting on and understanding at least one point is that after our board went through the trauma associated with being told by the government we weren't doing right and forcing us to have rates and debts that nobody wanted to have, that the board vowed that they weren't going to let that happen in the other utilities. So getting way ahead of the story here. But
And that was the beginning of our Century 2 infrastructure programs for water, electric, and natural gas. So.
yeah.
Y'all probably said this, but
are the only wastewater customers then in the city for KUB?
No.
The
But you had to
majority are.
update everything under under the Century mandate, regardless whether it was in the city or
That is
Yes,
or
oh,
the
yes,
county
oh, yes.
or anywhere
correct.
else?
Yes.
Because the goal was to essentially have a system that eliminates the sanitary sewer overflows. So that just had massive capital investment, storage tanks for I guess wastewater flow that were constructed. We have 5 or 6 of those throughout our system.
So was it needed outside of the city?
Yes.
Our service area goes east and northeast in the county, so it's really just our service area, and we can, but, so it's in our entire sewer system, yes.
So there are no more overflows, basically, right? Or are there some minor
There are some when extreme rains,
extreme
I mean,
rains? Yeah.
you know,
I don't know if y'all
severe weather.
remember, but they were quite common, and that's what brought all of this about.
Correct,
you know.
correct. And again, back in the day, your storm drains in certain areas of town were combined with sanitary sewer, and the whole system was designed, when there was a big rainstorm, it bypassed the sewer and go right in the river. They were called combined systems, and that's the way they were designed from the very get-go.
Yes.
And part of our whole deal was spending money to try to split the storm sewers apart from the wastewater sewers. I mean, capital went places because of things in the past, because the world changed. But your question is an interesting question. In fact, that goes into my next slide a little bit here.
I wonder if we're at 7:30.
This is one slide that,
Yeah, let's.
can I do this one?
Sure.
Just
You go for one more.
one more slide. This is an easy one.
Okay.
Okay. This is an easy slide. Following up on your question, a thing that's interesting here is, as I just went over a bill that had 4 utility services, and we talked about each one of them. The reality is only about 16% of our customers have all 4 of our services. Most of our customers only have one service, either electric or gas. So this pie shows the mixture of different customers, what services they have from us. And the reason why it's also varied is because our service territories are not the same. Our gas service territory is the Knox County, basically is what our gas service territory is. Our electric service territory doesn't have all Knox County, it just goes down to Cedar Bluff, but it has a whole lot of Union County, it has a whole lot of Granger County, it has a big portion of Sevier County, it has portions of 7 counties, so it's the geographic's different. The water has the city of Knoxville, and it kind of goes east and around the perimeter of the city. Everything's just got a different service territory. So depending on where you live, you have one service from us, you have 2, 3, 4. It just depends where you live. But most of our customers only have one service. So
And
is
soon
that
to
a
be
good
5,
Hey, that was
hopefully,
good.
5,
Appreciate
hopefully.
that. That was efficient.
What's
I-
the other?
Yeah, other, I was wondering that too.
Well, other could be, and they'll be out there, they'll have electric and wastewater. You go in the northeast Knox service territory, we serve wastewater there, but we don't serve the water, but we do serve the electric. And you could be a gas, wastewater, and electric as well in northeast Knox.
The Northeast, there used to be, well, there is Northeast Knox Utility District. They provided water and sewer services. They wanted to get out of the sewer side of it, so Hallsdale Powell took some of their customers. We took some of their customers. That's why you have some oddball situations out there. One example of that.
So you may be paying less for water and more for waste. Well, I guess you're doing that anyway, but yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could be paying northeast Knox for your water and paying KUB for your wastewater.
Right.
And all these where they're not for, you're paying somebody else for your other utility services.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Mike. That was very, very enlightening, and we're just getting in the beginning of this, and thank you to everybody on the panel. I think we hit a nice, the logic of what we've been doing sort of is really becoming very meaningful. We all got a good idea of all the services KUB provides first. Going through all of what you see up there one at a time. Some of you were able to take a tour today. Even we got to see a lot of the operations components that were very impressive. And Now, we're talking about policy matters, and we're really rubber hits the road on a lot of things, and we're understanding these rates is where we are doing a deep dive as we go. So I think, to me, this conversational approach that we've gotten into, especially that we don't have to feel constrained by, we're talking about subject Y, next, and we got to get through this. I mean, and so having this extra meeting, thank you, Kent, for suggesting that, and then just staying on this as long as the panel feels we need to, I think is time well spent. And to me, having this sort of, rather than the pure presentation, then response, at least right now, this seems to work very well. So I appreciate your answering the questions and leading the discussion, and everybody else as well. So we'll be sending out, or the notice on sometime the November meeting being scheduled, and I guess that'll have to happen reasonably soon, and you probably have the info you already need to get to.
Dr. Lyons, one of the ideas I want to throw out there is November 4th. So I'm going to put a date out there right now.
November
soon.
4th.
So if you want to check calendars now, we can send it to you later. I'm going to put a date out there. Sooner the better is my philosophy.
Is that a Thursday or?
Yeah, it's a Thursday.
That's the first Thursday?
Yeah, it's first Thursday in November. That's why I threw it out there. So you can check calendars while you're here. We'll ask the rest of the panel if I want to, keep it moving.
Yeah,
so,
if anybody.
Yeah, so November 4th.
Well, it works for me.
Yeah, Thursday, sorry. So just, you can let us know now or tomorrow, we'll come out for it.
And Bill, I want to respond to what you just said, and I don't want to start a whole new conversation.
Sure.
But I want to agree and disagree to a certain point.
Okay.
I think this informal sort of back and forth is great. Mm-hmm. But I do think there is going to be a point where we probably need to hear from a perspective other than just KUB's perspective on some of these topics. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to make sure that everyone is able to get a complete picture. KUB is chosen through the board or through the staff, or whatever, to make certain policy decisions. And I think that folks need to understand that there are other policies out there that could be, and then there may be some policies that other folks are doing that we want to introduce into the conversation. So I'm fine with us, sort of just rolling like this, where KUB is leading the discussion, everything like that. But I think at some point there are going to be some thorny issues that we probably need to stop on and do a deeper dive,
right,
and make sure that we get other perspectives. Because I think, if you're in a room, an echo chamber, and all you're hearing is the same voices, you're not getting the full perspective.
Right. I think, I agree. I think what we're getting is a baseline that we'll fully understand. And as Kathy said, I mean, the fundamental policy decisions are made at the board level. And then when we've gone through all of that to a sufficient degree, I think we need to have a deep discussion of, what are some other ways to make this work. And yes, I would just concur with that, Steve. Okay. Well, thanks again, everybody. It looks like, unless we don't hear the rain, did we miss the storm or what happened?
I don't know.
Still coming.
Okay, well, good. Maybe we beat it home. Okay, thanks, everybody.